Hi, my name is Casey Beck, and I'm a professor of practice in the Digital Media Practices program at Tulane University. I'm going to be presenting an upcoming paper, Fostering Creativity in Production-Based Service Learning Abroad, a case study from Greece, which will detail the process of developing a new service learning study abroad program that I developed and then led in the summer of 2023 with 19 students in Athens and Dorida, Greece. I wanted to take service learning and tie it to democratic citizenship, to think about where these two things come together. So it's not service learning for the sake of doing the service, but it's for the sake of becoming a democratic citizen. So what does it mean to be a citizen in this world? What does it mean to participate in a democracy? And this kind of idea shifts service learning a little bit. So a democratic-centered framework must involve a true partnership based on both sides bringing their own experience and expertise to the project. And this kind of collaboration requires a substantial change in the prevalent culture of academic institutions. So I really loved this definition of service learning because for me, it really took academia and flipped it on its head and instead elevates the expertise of our partners, of the people we're working with in the field. We come in to learn, not to teach. So who is our partner? So I had the great pleasure of partnering with a new nonprofit organization or new NGO in Greece, Iko. Eco, obviously from green, Yenya means generation, so green generation. It's also a play on the word family in Greek, which is Iko. So how did I come to know this organization? So my previous department chair at California State University East Bay, Mary Carderis, is on the board of Iko, and she was the one who kind of inspired the whole program. She was like, Casey, I really think you should develop a service learning program with Iko in Greece. She was right. It was amazing. But she was the one who kind of made this first connection to Iko. They are a climate corps in the model of AmeriCorps. If you're familiar with that, they've been around for under 2 years, and we would be working with them on their second year in a small town called Alpahori in a region called Dorida, which is up in the mountains. People know Greece for its beaches, but it's actually 80% mountains. And in these mountains are these ancestral villages that have been there for thousands of years, that are at the risk of becoming totally abandoned. The place that we went only had 2 full-time residents who live there. And so in this exact area that we went, one of the things Iko is doing with their cohort of climate corps is revitalizing a trail network. So the idea would be to inspire ecotourism in a place that is very economically depressed. So one of the things that I think was most important to help redistribute power and to actually acknowledge the inherent expertise in community members and in community leaders was to make them the producers of the films. So I wanted to upend the years of documentary filmmakers and this idea of documentary work being a person, a documentary filmmaker or a filmmaker with expertise, with technical expertise, story expertise, to go in, look around and say, okay, here's your story. That's not how critical service learning works. So what I did instead is spend the 8 months before the program working with Iko leadership to determine what the stories would be. So they were the producers. They were the ones who ultimately decided what would be filmed and what would be useful for them. And that was how we made media production into service learning. So the films that they made were actually the end result that the students made. We brought our technical expertise and our resources, and Iko brought their expertise in language, culture, and story. So it started, how we did this was in a Google document, right? I created this document, and you can see here kind of these big blocks of ideas. So I kind of threw some ideas out there to the Iko leadership. What about a promotional video? What about a photo essay? What about 1 or 2 documentaries? What would actually be useful and what would be possible? From this, we then created an actual solidified plan. So I had 19 students. The plan was to have 5 groups of 3 and 1 group of 4. I then pitched the students on the films, and they selected the films that they wanted to be on by ranked choice voting. So everyone got to choose. I think most people got their top 1 or certainly top 2 choices. We attached an Ikoyenya cohort member to each project. So you can see here their Ikoyenya cohort member, point of contact. And then what would they need in Dorida? What would they need to actually film? We ultimately left this up to the students. It is a learning experience. It was these were meant to be their projects. They would direct them. But we knew that we would have to facilitate a lot of that interaction and a lot of that shooting. So I wanted to get the majority of the readings and written work out of the way before we left. So we met on Zoom 2 times for 2 weeks before we left, so for a total of 4 times. And for each class, there were readings assigned, reading responses assigned, discussions. I myself used Eric Hartman's book, Community-Based Global Learning, The Theory and Practice of Ethical Engagement at Home and Abroad, to help conceptualize the course. If you are planning on creating a service learning study abroad program, I can't suggest this book enough. It was recommended to me by the Associate Director of our Center for Public Service, and it really did help orient my thinking and ground me in some of the best practices. So we met 4 times. Then we flew to Greece. We were based in Athens. Our partner in Athens was College Year Athens, CYA. The students, they have an orientation. They get students situated in housing. They provide lunch Monday through Friday. Studying abroad in Athens is a well-trod path, and so going there was pretty smooth. Once we were in Athens, we did the tours, right? As I told the students, we're gonna get all of the big things that you have to do when you're in Athens. Visit the Acropolis, visit the Agora, go to the Acropolis Museum. We're gonna do this first, I should say, to ground us into what it means to be in Athens, and then we're gonna move on to kind of modern day Greece and our work with our community partner, Ikoyenya. So we had orientations and tours. Again, a reestablishment of media production as service learning. We took a 6-hour bus ride up to Dorida, up in the mountains of Greece, into this tiny village. Alpahori is where we stayed. We were welcomed by Ikoyenya staff and their cohort of 9 young people who are working in their current current cohort. We had a dinner at the local tavern. There's only one. And you can see us, the group, dancing here the first night, learning traditional Greek dances. I mean, poorly. We were no pros, but the point was to have a good time. And we did. These are just some images of the group working for the 5 days that we were up there. You can see there was a mix of kind of this what people traditionally think of as service learning. Like sometimes that means actual manual labor. So you can see a group of Tulane students helping with the trail revitalization. We did receive a small grant from Tulane, from the Center for Public Service, to buy safety equipment for our students that we then left with Ikoyenya, so the safety equipment, so that they can host other large groups. There's a group of Ikoyenya cohort members and a few Tulane students just taking a break on the trail. And then, of course, at the same time, we mixed this with video production, and you can see a couple images from the video production. We rented gear in Athens that we brought up to the mountain with us. We rented 6 packages of Blackmagic Pocket 6Ks, a few lav mics, a few boom mics. The students mostly brought their own computers, and every one of them did have to have an external hard drive. Now, when we went up to the mountain, I said that only one person had to have a computer and an external hard drive. So to minimize our amount of stuff and gear that we were bringing. However, I'm open to suggestions. for me, I thought the best way to deal with PC and Mac divide was to have a PC and a Mac. So if you had a group and someone has a PC and someone has a Mac, both people had to bring their laptops up to the mountain, and both people had to drop their footage onto their respective hard drives. I didn't want to get into a situation of getting back to Athens and having to transfer files between the two operating systems. So that's what we did. We kind of duplicated it in situ, and it seemed to work for the most part. That was not our post-production issue. I'll tell you what our post-production issue is when we get there. So some of the complications, managing schedules of 19 students of 6 groups was difficult. Late night production meetings. I mean, I was working from 8 a.m. to midnight at the 5 nights that we were there. So it was pretty tiring. The students were in charge of their own schedules and turning in gear at the end of the day. This proved to be a challenge. Sharing gear was a challenge. While there weren't enough for everyone to have a full kit with audio and camera at the same time. I had assumed, they wouldn't all shoot at the exact same time and it would be easy enough to figure this out. It was not. The lesson learned is that next year, every group will have their own camera packet that they will be in charge of. And I will assign a grade to turning that camera package in at the end, complete and as they found it. So things were lost, small things, a clip here, a card there, a knob there, but it does add up, and then it does create problems for the next group that's using that equipment. After a very full but quick trip up to the mountain, we went back to Athens for 2 weeks to complete post-production. We were using Creative Cloud and Premiere Teams, which the students really loved and worked really well. I highly recommend it. Something that I learned that Teams has not quite figured out yet is duplicate audio file names. So if you're using a Zoom recorder, for example, every time you format, it's going to go back to Zoom_001. And even though you might have that in a file structure in a separate place, Premiere Teams, for some reason, gets very confused. And so we had a couple instances where Premiere was referencing the wrong audio file. People had synced everything and then they reopened it and it was out of sync or was totally different files. We quickly realized this was because of the naming structure. And so lesson learned, and next year one of the first things we'll do in post-production is rename all of the audio to have distinct audio file names and not rely on that audio, on that file structure to distinguish the different files. At the end of 2 weeks, at the end of a very crazy packed 2 weeks, we had a really lovely screening at CYA in Athens. Ikogenia staff in Athens came. They invited guests. CYA invited guests. So all said, we probably had 40 or 50 people for the screening, which was really great. And the students got to share their work and we got to leave feeling complete. Like we had made the videos and shared the videos. So even though it was a wild packed month, we were able to get it done. Let's watch one of the commercials that was made by one of the teams to see what students actually produced.
Ελπίδα.
Refreshing, υπέροχο μέρος να εργαστείς.
Grounding. Διασημότητα.
Breathtaking.
Ελευθερία στην εργασία.
Ευκαιρία.
Our goal at Ikogenia is to mobilize young people in practical, tangible climate action projects at the local level.
It's impossible to teach something like this in a classroom. This opportunity to come abroad, work with a nonprofit here, there's nothing really like that.
The partnership is inspiring. It inspires other young people to join Ikouenia here in Greece. It inspires other students at Tulane to get involved in media making, telling your own stories, telling their stories. Young people are documenting the efforts of other young people in this setting. What better?
Working on new projects like this that have a community engagement component, there's no other option but to connect.
We want there to be a platform to tell these stories, and so this partnership's allowing us and giving us the capacity to do that.
There is hope in critical service learning to actually create meaningful change. And that's that we want to empower students to see themselves as agents capable of acting together with others to build coalitions, foster public awareness, and create social change. Our goal is to avoid the trap of the cultural safari, instead discussing and demonstrating the tools the students will require to pursue the objectives they set forth within the engaged parameters of their own diverse lives and concerns. At the very least, this should short-circuit the stance of charitable pity that traditional volunteerism often produces. And I think our program, Environmental Media Production in Greece, is really radical in the sense that it is not volunteerism. This is not just your typical study abroad. This really offered the opportunity for students to work with a Greek organization, to work with their Greek peers as producers and directors to create something that we really do hope has a meaningful impact and a long-lasting life for Ikouenia. Thank you, and I do hope to hear from you in the comments or reach out with any suggestions or notes.